Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whenever or wherever you're watching. Let's get into the Courtship, Episode 9, The Strongest Prevail. Miss Remy and her court are having tea and discussing recent events. Meanwhile, the 6 men left are playing horseshoes.
I gave him a horseshoe!
By the way, the 6 men left are Mr. Combs, Mr. Hunter, Mr. Judge, Mr. Bokikio, Mr. Chapman, and Mr. Nazir. The men are discussing proposing, and Mr. Chapman is flaky about it as usual. The daily tea is delivered, and everyone is notified that there will be a festival of strength. The strongest suitor will be awarded with a one-on-one with Miss Remy. Mr. Combs feels self-conscious about not being as cut as the other suitors. First up are Mr. Chapman versus Mr. Bokikio, who have to lift a cement ball onto a barrel. Chapman lifts faster. Next up is Mr. Nazir versus Mr. Judge. Mr. Judge dusts him effortlessly. Finally, Mr. Combs faces off with Mr. Hunter. While he worries about not being able to do it, he's able to best Mr. Hunter. I worried that he could have injured his back with that form though. I'm sure they signed injury waivers. The next challenge is called the Log of Terrific Endurance, in which they must hold a heavy log over their head for as long as they can. The groupings or heats this time are Mr. Chapman versus Mr. Nazir. Mr. Nazir not only wins, but shows off as he does. Next up, Mr. Combs versus Mr. Judge. Mr. Judge showboats too, but it backfires as Mr. Combs wins, to his own surprise. Then Mr. Hunter faces off with Mr. Bokikio. Mr. Hunter is chillin' holding that log while Bokikio struggles. Hunter wins, and so he has a face-off with Mr. Nazir. Mr. Hunter loses, as was instructed by the producers, in my humble opinion. I do not believe that Mr. Nazir held the log up longer than Mr. Hunter, because Mr. Hunter is not a good actor. He literally looked like he just decided to stop rather than fail to hold up the log. I said on Twitter that I could watch a show made up of men doing strength challenges weekly. Anyway, Miss Remy goes on a solo date with Mr. Nazir, who she says she has a connection with. They probably start kissing, and at this point, Miles Nazir snitches on Lincoln Chapman. I am of two minds on this. On the one hand, it's a bitch move. On the other, I think Van Man Chapman is wasting Nicole's time and... Still, I don't see Mr. Nazir as a real option for her either because he's just playing a role. Mr. Hunter takes a moment to get some understanding with Miss Remy. She tries to ruffle his hair and get him to loosen up. His hair doesn't move. He says that he has a tough time being vulnerable, but he will try harder. Later in the men's lounge, they receive a letter from Miss Remy, and we already know from the previews, it's to invite Mr. Bokikio to the spa. Bubble bath time. Looks like Chapman isn't the only suitor with cold feet. Mr. Bokikio also voices his reservations about proposing. I can't say I fault him though. It would be hella hard to overlook the fact that Nicole boned Van Man. Am I the only one that thinks it's weird as hell to be actively hooking up with one guy but expecting all the other guys to know you're hooking up with that one and still compete for your attention? I'm putting myself in their shoes. I wouldn't want to compete or a guy who was hooking up with another woman in my face. I guess I'm old-fashioned, which is why a Regency-era dating show appealed to me. Note that me talking about how I feel has no bearing on how you as an individual feel, nor am I judging Nicole. She is free to live her life as she pleases, and I will root for her to do so. I'm just sharing my thought process. Miss Remy has a conversation with Mr. Chapman, asking him if he even wants to be here. He says that he's falling in love with her, but that he doesn't want to slow down. He also says that he doesn't think that he can give her the life that she wants. She sheds tears over this guy. She says that this hurts and that he's breaking her heart. He makes no move to comfort her, just watches her cry with a smirk on his face. She runs out in tears, and there is a great scene with her sister and Miss Cleary comforting her. That was really touching. Chapman tells the men what happened and that he may be leaving. He lets them know that he knows someone snitched on him. He just doesn't know who. It's dance card time. Miss Remy is wearing a pewter shade gown with 3D floral embellishments and sheer chiffon cap sleeves. I love the bejeweled hair accessory she's wearing, but I actually think I like Mrs. Baker's dress more. The 3 men chosen for the dance card are Mr. Chapman, Mr. Combs, and Mr. Hunter, while the men safe are Mr. Judge, Mr. Nazir, and Mr. Bokikio. As she dances, her voiceover tells us that she feels that Mr. Combs hasn't gotten closer to her, Mr. Hunter hasn't opened up, and Mr. Chapman broke her heart, but she's still passionate about him. Mr. Combs is giving too much bestie vibes. He has to kick up the passion if he wants Miss Remy's heart. He gets to stay. Mr. Hunter didn't really show enough of his personality, and now it's too late. She says she doesn't think they will get there, so he's going home. She dances and talks to Van Man, and she tells him that he broke her heart. He says he's so sorry. She says that what they have is real. He says he feels that way too. Then she tells him, if it's love, you need to fight for it, and he promises he will. Her adding that takes me out of the moment. Anyway, she lets him stay, and most of Twitter was like, There were a couple of people still rooting for the man though. No disrespect to y'all, but I don't see what y'all are seeing in him. Well, that's into my notes. Let me know what you thought of this episode of The Courtship. Did I forget to talk about anything? Let me know in the comments. By the way, I'm also reviewing 90 Day Fiancé Season 9, and I review horror, sci-fi, and thriller movies on my other channel, What Did I Just Watch? So check those out if you're interested. Until next time, one love.